and welcome to In the Margins. I have the distinct honor and pleasure of welcoming Dr. S. Kent Butler, who will be our guest for this episode. And if I'm not mistaken, you are still currently, I believe, president of the American Counseling Association. And I want to start right there, Dr. Butler.
Sure.
If you could talk a little bit about your career, your work now, and how it, of course, intersects with these issues of diversity when it comes to higher education that diversity has been covering for so many years. Dr. Butler.
Sure. I started off my career with a communications degree and thought that I wanted to go into being a television anchor. And so that was my first foray into life after having a college degree, but it wasn't meant to be. And I was always doing mentoring and working with young people. It happened in my undergraduate years, and it happened when I got into my counseling degree and then got into my PhD, that I kept reaching back. And in fact, I did my work with the Upward Bound program to kind of do my research for my dissertation. At the time that I went into being in my counseling program, prior to that, for 4 years, I worked in the H. Fred Simons African American Cultural Center at the University of Connecticut. It really was my entry into looking at how I can bring the Black experience to a predominantly white campus. I really enjoyed that. And so when I made the switch to counseling, I always had this inkling that I would go back and I would work on a college campus and do things along the lines of diversity and inclusion. Again, my limited thinking at the time was for me to go back, get my degree, and be back at the cultural center. Of course, when you get educated and start looking at other opportunities, things start to open up for you. And I went into counselor education, and my thought was then to work with mentoring and young people, especially Black males, on how to get involved with their mental wellness and how to move forward in their academic prowess, right? To be able to show up and to be their authentic selves. And so helping to build self-esteem was part of my mission with regards to doing the work. That led me to just staying involved with multicultural and social justice issues. I had the opportunity in my career to be a part of a team that revised the multicultural counseling competencies, which is now the multicultural social justice counseling competencies. And it was about how we can be inclusive and be mindful with cultural humility and cultural responsiveness, how we work with counseling relationships and how we work with our clients. Because most people, especially in the Black community, were always kind of leery of or had skepticism about what counseling was. Part of my role was to kind of change that narrative, to let people know that counseling was okay and that we were here to help you get well so you can work through whatever issues that you might be going through. Those things all led to me staying involved with DE&I type measures, and then also got me the opportunity to grow in leadership. And leadership got me to be president of the American Counseling Association. I am the second African-American male in 70 years to be president of this organization.
Now, you talk about mental wellness, specifically looking at the Black male. I mean, people like myself, I went to a predominantly white institution, and back when I was an undergrad, I remember there were only a few of us. And so, one of my thoughts as we talk about mental health and wellness is the experience of the other on college campuses. We'll call them, minoritized students and faculty, but of course, looking at students in particular. I was wondering if you could talk just a little bit of the challenges that are unique to minoritized students. And you mentioned African-American males. That challenge is perhaps most serious if you look at different subsets. But I was wondering if you could talk about your work with what I would call minoritized Black males on college campuses. What are their unique challenges?
Right.
And what are some takeaways that you might be able to share with our audience about the unique challenge if we're just talking about the Black male on college campuses?
So, one of the things that I found on a predominantly white campus was every Black student was there because of some type of a handout. And that already set you up for being a target, being marked, possible failure. Whether you got there on your own recognizance or you got there because you went to an academic program, there were people on the campus that regardless saw you as somebody coming in with a handout. How you showed up was dictated by how you were treated in the classroom experience, walking into office spaces, seeking support and help. Most of the individuals coming were first generation and did not have a proper outlook on what a college campus was offering to them. So they didn't know to go to this office or to go to this other space to seek support and help. It was okay to do that if you were having some issues or things along those lines, because on top of being minoritized, you then also have to deal with any college student needs to go to. You're already fighting from behind some type of a 8-ball that is not allowing you to kind of show up how you may have showed up in high school, understanding the ropes. There's something to be said about intergenerational wealth. There's something to be said about people being handed down the knowledge of what goes on a college campus. And when you go in with those kind of tools, you can navigate much better than somebody who doesn't even know that there's an ombudsman's office or there is a career services office. I went in not knowing a whole lot about that because my mom, although she had an MBA, as she was raising her children part-time at a college. So I was the first person to actually in my family to be living on a college campus and having to navigate the day-to-day of dealing with microaggressions and all those things. And back in the day when I was in school, I didn't know what microaggressions were. I just thought that was what was happening to all people and didn't recognize that it was really targeted specifically towards me. I think those types of things, when you talk about students having homesickness, students having financial aid issues or issues with their courses, all those things have you at a disadvantage if you don't know what those resources are on your college campus to support that. And so that is one of the things that I think stops a lot of students from finding academic success because they're too busy trying to deal with life experiences that no one else takes into consideration. Those things that I think that really put Black males at a disadvantage. And so my hope when I was working on those campuses and when I still work on these campuses to kind of show them a different way, show them a different pattern, let them know that they can be successful. I worked on self-esteem. I worked on helping them to kind of build their resilience to just the messiness that sometimes occurs when people don't necessarily see you for who you are and what you bring to the table.
It's interesting. We've done a lot of reporting on mental health on college campuses and how the pandemic specifically has impacted student mental health on college campuses. And, I wanted to get your perspective on specifically, what is happening currently on college campuses. There's one particular issue that you raised, and I probably want to start with that particular piece, what's happening with first generation students. One of the concerns among higher educators is that, we may have lost a generation of first generation students, who had to overcome a myriad of struggles just to get in the door, right? Then to be told, you got to go online, campuses closed. Listen, a lot of them, didn't have the broadband access that they needed. A lot of them didn't have the study spaces at home. If home is crowded, there's no space that's dedicated for college study. Then a lot of these first generation students, one of the concerns is, hey, listen, the generation could be lost. That's a real big concern. But I was wondering if you might elaborate on that first generation to go to college piece. And that goes, of course, beyond African American. You have a lot of course, Hispanic students and other students who are first to get to college.
Right.
And most recently, a lot of them were getting in or confronted with the challenge of the pandemic, which was completely overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And so I was wondering if you might talk a little bit about that first generation piece and how I would say even the pandemic has complicated the journey for those students.
Let me pull back a little bit and just talk a little bit about CTSD. And CTSD is a continuous traumatic stress disorder. So you talk about a student who has gone through life having to deal with microaggressions, having to deal with racial profiling, having to deal with people not seeing their worth and not appreciating what they bring to the table. You're especially in the Black and Brown communities, people who did not necessarily allow them to show their academic excellence because they had one way of showcasing it, right? So the social learning theory tells us that people learn multiple ways, but in most Black and Brown communities, they're taught one way. You have to take this test and you need to show up and you need to be able to pass this test. And if you don't pass this test, you get the F. But think about this, if you're a Black male, 4th grade, 5th grade, and you know the material, you studied, you understand it, you go to school, you take the test, and you get an F. But you know the stuff. The teacher knows you know the stuff. The teacher has been with you every day. She's seen you bring in your homework. She's seen you talk about it in class. She's seen you do it. If you were to write an essay, you would be able to knock it out the box. But because she has to test one certain way, you can't fit that box and you show up and you don't have that. So all your life, you're up against challenges to prove yourself. And then you get on a college campus during a pandemic after having dealt with all this stuff. And again, CTSD, that's an anxiety and distress. There's all these things that come up. And you're not necessarily dealing with those things because you don't have access to mental wellness or a counselor or something along those lines, because there's a stigma attached to going to see a counselor or saying that there's a weakness that you may have when it comes to how you are seeing life and how you're dealing with matriculating through school. So now you go onto a campus, you're already again behind that 8 ball we talked about, and the pandemic hits. And a whole new host of issues come forward because you don't have a laptop, like you said, don't have broadband access. You may not have books because you were planning on getting your books by going to the library because that's where you were able to get that because the cost of books were exorbitant. And so all these types of things you're dealing with. And on top of that, you have to have masks. Finding masks was not easy. It was expensive. Having hand sanitizer, having paper towels, having all those things were not always at your disposal. And as you shared, now on top of that, you're worried about getting sick. You're told that you either have to come to campus because you won't get credit, or if you don't come to campus, you have to be online at home, like you shared, perhaps with a lot of different extraneous noise behind you, because that is just your life. And then you have to adapt to what that is. So if you're used to going to campus and going to class and studying after school before you go home, there's nobody for you to talk to. There's nobody for you to share this with. You're holding it in. You might see that you don't study well by being online. There's many people who found that out. There's a lot of anxiety that was surrounding that, not knowing how to navigate that, having issues getting online and getting into your class or getting into the types of things your professor may have asked you to do online and not having anybody to talk to. Now, when you are on campus, perhaps you might have ran into this person or ran into an office and got some kind of response. If you don't know how to navigate a college experience, and now you're doing it from your home and not knowing that you could get in touch with academic affairs, or you can get a withdrawal from a course, or you can do all these other things, then you're again at a disadvantage. And that's some of the things that the pandemic has brought on, maybe for all students, but especially those students who did not have that access because this is their first generation time on being on campus.
You know, one of the things that come to mind as you speak about some of those issues is, you know, we talked about in the magazine, a number of sources have talked about, listen, it's a twin pandemic that's going on for Black people.
Oh, yes.
You know, twin pandemic, you know, for Black people, of course, and other minoritized groups, you're dealing with, of course, COVID-19. But at the same time, and we've talked about this in a number of forums, you know, you have this kind of flashpoint on systemic racism. And, you know, one of the challenges I think that, you know, there have been a number of leaders on majority campuses that are well-intentioned, but at times I think that it has been a challenge for them to fully grasp the struggle of the students that they're trying to reach, right? They're trying to get them to persist and graduate, and they have all these interventions. And sometimes it's not even about resources. Sometimes it's just about kind of understanding.
Understand.
And I wanted you to speak to the piece of the majority institution administrator trying to understand what is happening with regards to the impact of microaggressions,
Yeah.
or the trauma, even myself as a Black male, when I'm seeing the loop killing of George Floyd and everything's on a loop, man, even as a grown person, I'm like, man, I need to turn this off, man. This is kind of traumatizing, right? For me to think about, listen, man, is my life in danger, man, if I wear this hoodie outside? So much I think that young people are dealing with, and they are well-intentioned, of course, administrators at PWI who probably just don't have the understanding. They got the resources, but not necessarily understanding. What has been some of your messaging to leaders in the PWI space who are really trying to make a difference when it comes to persistence, when it comes to graduation, but are not really understanding the struggle? What's some of your messaging when it comes to people say, what, listen, I want to make a difference. Where do I start in understanding what's happening with these minoritized populations?
When I was first approached about how to help Black folk, this is like back in the day when I was working in the cultural center, I always gave the answer that I thought would be able to support us moving forward and somebody getting it. I won't classify it as just male, but white administrators may not necessarily understand because they don't have to understand. They are there for one purpose only, to graduate students, to get them through and work within the resources that they have. But they don't think about the day-to-day of what is going on for a student, what a student is having to deal with. I remember when George Floyd's murder occurred, people coming to me and asking me, what can I do? I only allowed myself to watch it one time. I've never seen it again since the first time I've ever saw it. I don't allow myself to watch that. And I was a news junkie. I used to watch TV, but everything I was always seeing was always a hit on me as a Black male. Also, think of myself in lines of what was going on for President Obama, because as a Black male close to his age, the things that were hitting him from white males and from the white community were things that I was feeling as well. So when I was like, I know how he feels. I know exactly what he's going through. So when white administrators were coming to me and saying to me, what can I do? I had to stop trying to teach them what to do. And I had to say to them, what do you want to do? I have to every day navigate this and figure out what I need to do to make this happen. And, and one of the things that I gave them, I said, like, you fell and skinned your knee, you would know what to do. These things happening in Black and brown communities, people dying, and you don't know what to do. What was it? What if it was somebody in your family that was going through this? What would you do? How about you going in and immersing yourself into communities, you going and doing the work that you need to do to find how you want to do this work? Because if you're telling me you want to be a co-conspirator with me, if you want to be somebody who's really being an advocate for people in Black and brown communities, then show up. Because I can't tell you what to do. Because when I tell you what to do, what happens most times, and I've seen this happen numerous times with white administrators, well, can we do it this way though? Can we tweak it this way? So this, and again, what does that do? It keeps you comfortable with where you want to do and where you want to take this. So don't come ask me the question about what can you do? And then when I give you what you should do and you tell me you can't do it, let's try it this way, then you're not necessarily in it to help that be a situation that can flourish and come through to the end. And that's not all of them, but a majority of them will not allow themselves to actually go into the communities of the people who they are serving and understanding from their perspective, their worldviews, what it is that they need and what it is that they can be given from a university perspective so that they can be successful. They want the quick fix. They want the imagery of, hey, this is what we're doing. We drop a statement here and we drop a statement there. But people in Black and brown communities know when a statement is a statement and when you are actually there helping them work through whatever it is that you got going on. And that's what's going to last. The works that you do is going to show up, not the statements and the getting on TV or sending out a memo that says, hey, I'm down with you, and then we don't see you down with them. It's really about what is it that you want to do? Show up that way. Make the mistakes that I make every day when I don't always get it right. Because you can't have that fear that you're going to upset somebody. If your heart's in the right place and you really want to support and help these students who are suffering or working through whatever issues they're working through, then show up and be there authentically for them. And then they will find a way to accept that. Because once they trust you in that space, then you'll know what to do.
You know, I was wondering if you talk a little bit about the counseling space virtually.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's interesting as, of course, we've gone through this pandemic and, you know, we've seen, of course, obviously counseling move into the virtual space. There's been some technology providers that have come up with the solutions to say, all right, if we need help, you can utilize this resource. And so, you know, one of the questions I have for you is with regards to the modalities for counseling, reaching students in this virtual age. Things, of course, are coming back into person, but of course, there's huge pressure to say, all right, we need to maintain a hybrid posture, right? You know, even with myself, you know, it seemed that things were going up and down all around, but the need for counseling remained. In fact, it's even more acute with people on lockdown, and we know the challenges with minoritized students. So I wonder if you talk about, I want to talk a little bit about counseling modalities, how they have shifted, and what institutions need to do to make sure that virtual, in-person, pandemic, not a pandemic, that their students have access to this necessary counseling, especially going through all these stressors. So I was wondering if you talk about the modalities of counseling, how they have shifted amid this pandemic, and what administrators on college campuses need to know about making sure that their students, particularly the most vulnerable populations, have access to counseling.
I think the first thing we have to recognize is that we all come to this from different perspectives and angles. I grew up in a traditional counseling sense. I needed to have somebody sitting across from me, right? And so I actually went kicking and screaming into telemental health and things along those lines, because I was of the mindset, and again, this is our conditioning, right? I was of the mindset that in order for me to be a good counselor, I needed to be in the room with you. I needed to be able to see everything that you were doing. I needed to know if you were twitching your arm or if you were tapping your foot. I needed to know all that. I slowly got to understand that building a relationship with somebody isn't necessarily about always being in physical proximity to them, right? And that there are other ways that I can figure it out. And so our teaching programs have to start to look at how we can help our students, some of them who will struggle with this, be able to see somebody on a screen, be able to know because their eyes are twitching or because they are sweating or they are doing something that only you can see in that box that lets you know that something is not right, or there's something that is bothering or troubling them. It's a different way of understanding what our role is as a counselor. There's different types of questions that we now have to ask so that we can get to that. There's different protections that we have to have into place to make sure that now that we're doing this virtually, if you were in my office and you were suicidal in some type of your ideations, I would be able to work with you and perhaps Baker Act you or get you the support and help that you need. But now I have to be really conscious of the fact that if this person allows themselves to share with me that they're thinking of harming themselves, what do I need to do? What do I need to protect myself? And what do I need to do to protect this individual? And so telemental health adds a whole new realm of challenges to counselors. So they need to know who is in their vicinity. What are the offices that can help if something is necessary? How do you get a hold of the police office? Or how do you get a hold of emergency personnel or something along those lines if something happens while you are working with someone? Because as a counselor, you may go very, very deep into some very emotional things. The internet is providing us opportunities to be able to do that. And so we have to up our game to know what we would do when we were in person and how we will now take that to the next level when the counseling is now done online. And it's not as easy as saying, well, I was trained as a counselor, I'll just get over it. I'll do it. I'll do what I need to do. There's a whole host of things that now have to be into place. Your consent forms need to be different. Your abilities to communicate and share are a lot different. Your accessibility is different. Now your client might say, hey, I need you today at such and such and such a time. And you have to now build in barriers because you're not always going to be accessible. The other piece that's coming up are people are now working across state lines or having the ability to work across state lines because of the needed access to counselors because people are hurting. I mean, people are hurting throughout the country, throughout internationally as well. The need for counselors is rising and rising and rising. And so how do we do that? And on top of that, we go back to what we talked about earlier. What do you do for the person who can't come to your office, who wouldn't normally come to your office, take a bus to your office, who doesn't have internet in their home? What do you do when they need to go to a cafe, perhaps, or be outside on a cell phone? How do you take into consideration their confidentiality and make sure that they're safe in order to do all that? So all these things come up for someone who is working as a counselor with this day and age of being in an online environment.
I was wondering if you talk a little bit about your work with the American Counseling Association. Of course, you've mentioned that appointment was historic in terms of not having many leaders of color. I was wondering if you talk about your leadership with the organization. I believe it's been almost a full year since you have been in leadership, but you're looking at your bio, you've been involved with ACA for some time now. I was going to talk about your work with ACA, some of your priorities for the association, and some of the goals that you set out, and some goals that you may yet to accomplish. I want to talk a little bit about your work with ACA.
I'll be honest and tell you that I ran 3 times before I became president. Those first 2 times weren't supposed to be. I believe that it was destined for me to be president now. It needed to be now. The work that has shown up for me as president has been monumental. It's been a lot. This year, I was tasked with doing a strategic plan for the organization that's now been in place for next 5 years. I have been tasked with hiring a new CEO because we are losing our CEO July 1. And so I've been in the midst of doing a search to bring in a new CEO. We're very close at this point in time signing someone. And so I'm really excited about that. That's part of a legacy that I leave to the organization as well, because now if this person works out, doesn't work out, I am the second African-American male in 70 years to bring this new person on board, right? And so those were 2 significant things that I had to do. On top of that, I have been learning how to navigate this pandemic. I've been asked to do keynotes and to do opportunities in different states, understanding whether I can travel, should not travel, thinking about my family and whether or not what am I carrying with me or possibly carrying with me. I had the opportunity to create a podcast, and it's been going well. And I've also had the opportunity to start having virtual town hall meetings with our membership to keep them informed on what's been going on, something that hadn't been happening in the past. So I've been able to initiate a lot of different things, as well as continue to do the business of the association. And so it's been a taxing year to be able to do all that, but I felt I was ready for it. I was prepared. I have some great mentors. Came up in the Association for Multicultural Counseling and Development. I served as a president there 10 years ago. From that time, I started building, like you say in my resume, I started building on leadership opportunities. People started coming to me, started seeing my expertise when it comes to multicultural and social justice work, and now the work that I'm doing in DE&I. And so it was important. I came into this year with a mission. You probably heard of the House of Diversity, or House Built by Diversity, and I'm saying it wrong. but there's this initiative that was put forward. The fable is about the giraffe and the elephant, and how the house, typically the houses, the institutions that we work in are not built for the elephant, right? They're built for the giraffe, and so the people who can circumvent that system, typically a white ethnocentric, one built on supremacy system, to kind of infiltrate that and to integrate that, so to speak, and be a part of that system, you have to shake some things up. So I created 2 hashtags that were my go-to this year. One was hashtag shake it up and hashtag tap someone in. And so it was built on the fact that we need to come in and recognize that we are sometimes the elephant, and we need to shake some things up and show up that, you know, if you're going to invite us to the table, then we need to be at the table. And you need to listen to us, you need to hear our voices, you need to take our concerns seriously, and we need to be included and involved in the decision-making. And you need to understand that you can't just make decisions on our behalf without knowing who we are and what we stand for. And so my whole modus operandi this year has been to show up, to continue to use my voice, because this is my platform right now, and to ensure that people who look like me, who don't have the opportunity, that I'm going to speak on their behalf. And I'm going to open the door for leaders to come in who haven't had the opportunity before. There have been so many individuals who have the wherewithal to do this work. If you look at our organization and look at the structure, you'll see that it has typically been, the helm has been held by either white women or white males. And even those who are growing in leadership, we're not building them up. We're not actually mentoring them into leadership. And so my goal is to continue to put that on the forefront. Let's talk about that. And on top of that, I had to show up perfect. I had to come in to this role. People may be skeptical that, is this Black man going to be able to come in here and lead our organization? So now, not only do I lead the organization, have to do the strategic plan, have to bring in a new CEO, I have to also deal with that on top of the microaggressions I get hit with every day for being who I am and what I look like. And so, and I recognize that. The added stress of that, the added anxiety that comes with having to make sure that you're always on, that you say things that people can hear and digest, but at the same time hold them accountable for their behaviors, the things that they're doing, the things that they're saying, and showing up every single day ready to fight this battle. And so that's kind of been what my year has been like.
Dr. Butler, I just wanted to talk a little bit about your future. Obviously, you mentioned, counselor education, either at the K through 12 level. You work with Modalities, you work on higher ed campuses. You have had the opportunity,
right,
to lead out in so many different spaces. Obviously emphasizing the importance of counseling, and even historically, I think about, those who are reluctant, even in some of our minoritized communities, say, man, you saw a counselor, man, what are you going to a counselor for? But I think especially given what is happening of late, it's becoming clear the necessary role of counselor and the advantages that some of us have who have access to counselors, right? We get to understand why we're doing the things that we're doing, right? That we don't even know. It's like, oh, okay, so many advantages for those who have been exposed and have come to appreciate the importance of the work of a counselor. So I was wondering, my last question would be a question for you in your future. Given all of the opportunities that you have had, what are some of the goals that you have as you think about your own work and what the future holds, perhaps?
So my wife and I have developed a company, a consulting company that I'm hoping to build upon with regards to doing this DE&I work, doing this work on helping people come to an understanding of who they are, their self. I think it begins with you having self-love and understanding how you are contributing to whatever space you are in. So you may come in thinking that you're anti-racist, but are the people who are in that space feeling that you are anti-racist? And how do you show up and integrate into these spaces so that you can do this good work? My hope is to continue to be a voice. I want to be a spokesperson. I want to go in and do trainings and other things that support people actually doing what they say that they put themselves forth to do, right? So when these administrators come to me and they say, what can I do? That when I share with them what they can do, that they take it to heart and they invest in that. Do it in a way that helps them understand that I'm here to support and help you. And I'm not here trying to make you feel bad or make you feel guilty or we're done with that. We know that racism occurs. We know that people have been marginalized and oppressed. We know that. And I'm not here to try to now cater to you and your feelings about feeling, guilty or feeling you are being misunderstood when people have been hurting for centuries because of people who have been in positions of power who did not listen to them and did not hear them. And so I want to go out and start having the difficult dialogues. I'm building a training module that's about how do you have these difficult dialogues? How do you get out of your own way and show up in spaces and allow yourself to learn from the people who are there? If I want to go into a community and support them, I can't go in trying to fix them. I need to go in and find out from them what it is that they need and then do what I can to support that growth and that development in that community so that they have the wherewithal to say, hey, I have pride or I have understanding. I want to go see a counselor. I want to do this. I want to do that, because now you're building me up to be able to do that. But when you come in and you want to just handhold me through this process and feed me something that keeps you comfortable, then it doesn't allow for me or the people who I come from to actually show up and be their authentic selves. And so that's the goal. The goal is to bring about an opportunity for us to have true conversations and be responsive culturally in a manner that allows us to be able to do this good work, right? That we're not just talking the talk. Right now, I'm tired of us just talking the talk. I want us to put our money where our mouth is and to really put our boots to the ground and do the work that's going to help make the changes that are necessary. I think the things that have happened over this past couple of years have opened the eyes of individuals to the atrocities that have been happening in Black and brown communities, things that have been happening with Asians in terms of how Asian Americans have been treated, the ways that gay, lesbian, transgender individuals have been treated. People are opening up to seeing all that. Now it's about building a mission that we start to do what's necessary to change that. I often say that we in our institutions, no matter what it is, whether it is Congress, whether it is higher ed, we're always governed by, and this is a facetious number, but we're always governed by these 10 white men. No matter where we go here, we go into a grocery store, we're governed by these 10 white men. We go into higher education, we're governed by these 10 white men. And these men are not built to try to change and be inclusive of other individuals, because they haven't in all these years found ways to invite but one or two up the ladder. And so how do we infiltrate that and allow people to say, hey, leadership looks different? That's what I tried to do with American Counseling Association. I can be a good leader and not be a white male. And so show up and see that I can do this. And how do we do that in all of our infrastructures so that we can break down and dismantle and decolonize the things that are happening in these organizations that are keeping people from finding their promise? Because I don't think there's anybody who doesn't want to find success, but there are people who are definitely there to block that success because they are fearful that they'll lose something in the process.
I just want to thank you for being so generous with your time. Thank you for joining us on this episode of In the Margins. I believe our audience will gain tremendously from your insights. Again, thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and God bless you, man, doing this work. And, we just have to keep showing up.
Dr. Butler, thank you so much. God bless you. Take care. All right. Bye-bye.